to a bonus episode of IceCast. This episode is more of a monologue, so it wouldn't really fit in the other IceCast formats. But this episode is going to be about why Legends of Ocarina of Time resonates with games, especially those games growing up around 1998, which is when the game came out. And I feel like this game actually it kind of encapsulates life in a sense. I mean, the game's about Link growing up, basically. After he pulls the Master Sword, he turns into an adult. Yeah, it's spoilers. The game came out 22 years ago. I don't give a shit. But there's more to it than that, and I feel like there's a lot that, whether consciously or not, that this game teaches us about life. And I've done some thinking about this, and I kind of wanted to share my thoughts about what kind of makes this game resonate with gamers and its meaningfulness in terms of the actual story and some themes rather than the actual gameplay itself, which was very revolutionary, but we're not going to dive into that. Okay, so young Link starts out isolated in Kokiri Forest. He's never been outside the forest, neither is the other Kokiris, and he's the only Kokiri without a fairy. Now, again, later we find out that as Link can grow up, he's not actually a Kokiri at all. But he's the only one without a fairy, and they call him Boy Without a Fairy and all this stuff until the game starts, and the fairy is basically his call to action of the hero's journey. But since all the other Kokiris have fairies, and Link doesn't, it sets him apart. And obviously since he's the hero, he's it kind of symbolizes how he has a destiny plan greater for things greater than just the forest. And it shows that since all the other Kokiris start with fairies, they've all realized their potential already. Whereas Link, he still has room to grow. And all the Kokiris, they're all childs. They're all children, and they stay children until they die. They never actually grow into adults. Now, the Kokiris are isolated in Kokiri Forest, fitting by the name, and they're protected by the Great Deku Tree. They don't really need to leave the forest. The Deku Tree protects them from evil spirits and provides for their needs by watching over the forest and all within. Excuse me. So none of the Kokiris really have to grow up, if you think about it. Everything they have is provided by the Great Deku Tree, and they don't have a need to grow up. They're sheltered, and they stay children because they're sheltered. Whereas Link, he grows up because he leaves. He's the one with potential to realize, and it kind of shows that if you just stay sheltered your whole life, you'll have a childlike approach to life in order to grow up and realize your potential and need to be exposed to the outside world and evil. Now, after the Great Deku Tree dies, after Link defeats the Spider Queen inside of the Great Deku Tree, the Kokiri's world is shocked. They're not vulnerable to evil now. And we'll come back to that later after Link returns. But he leaves the forest. He has to go out into the world to actualize his potential. He's the only one that leaves. He's the only one that grows up. Very important. And the reason that's important is because it's not a grammatically correct sentence. But anyway, the reason that's important is that again, it stresses that you have to expose yourself to evil, to malevolence, to even just unseen circumstances in order to actually realize your potential and grow up mentally in terms of being not childlike in your demeanor, because no one likes a 10-year-old in a 40-year-old body. It just isn't right. So in your life, you have to take chances, you have to go out into the world in order to fully grow up and realize your potential. And that's reflected here in the game. Okay, so Link meets the Gorons and the Zoras, and the Gorons are basically in the realm of fire, buried caves, there's like lava, and the Zoras are water people. They're aquatic. And we're going to go to this fire and ice contrast here later. but they're basically foils to each other, and we will cover that later. So, moving on, after Link gets all the spiritual stones, and he pulls the Master Sword out, it locks him in the Sacred Realm for 7 years. That's interesting about 7 years, but while he's locked up, Ganon steals the Triforce, and he only gets the Triforce of Power. He leaves the Triforce of Wisdom behind, and then Ganon uses that Triforce of Power to take over the world. And it shows that unchecked power, without wisdom or courage, just leads to tyranny. So, now, Link he's grown up, he's an adult, he has to go out and stop the tyrant. And he's been locked away for 7 years. Well, 7 is a number associated with perfection. It's a number associated with God in biblical contexts. So, Link has to perfect himself in order to be able to stop the tyrant. He has to become a perfect version of himself, and only then will he be able to stop Ganondorf and the evils he's created. Now, when Link leaves the Temple of Time and goes back into the castle market, he finds the whole thing ravaged and destroyed, and instead of the bustling citizens dancing around, it's zombies, or Redeads is what they're called in Zelda. It's a bunch of Redeads that have the little scary little scream, and they get on your Link's head and start humping him, and you lose hearts. So, it just appears that evil has permeated the very essence of Hyrule. Ganondorf has been such a tyrant that everywhere you look, around every corner is some form of evil. And this kind of reflects growing up. When you look as a child, you have a much more positive, more innocent view of the world. Everything through that lens, everything just looks shinier, happier. And when you go an adult, you open your eyes to all the evil in the world. And it might not be taken over by your world, might not be taken over by Redeads, but you still are sensitive to the evil around you, and you can see it. And the world becomes a lot less rosy when you can see the malevolence in it. And this kind of loss of childhood innocence is congruent with Link growing up, and it's this exposure to this loss of childhood innocence that gives Link his potential, and the rest of the Kokiri, they're helpless. And in fact, when you go back to Kokiri Forest, it's infested with monsters, which can tell you one of two things. Number one is maybe those childhood memories you created weren't as rosy as looking back. You always look at the past through rose-tinted goggles. You romanticize the past, and this idea of romanticizing the past comes up again in the game. But maybe there were some monsters in your past that you just were unaware of because you romanticized it. But the other thing is all the Kokiris are hiding in their houses, afraid of the monsters, and they're helpless. They can't do anything. They're still children after all. They have no potential. They have no way to conquer the evil. Only you can save them, because only you've grown up. Because only you've left the shelter of Kokiri Forest. And now the Deku Tree's dead. Well, what are the Kokiri going to do? They've unprepared for this. So when Link becomes an adult, you'll notice that half his items are grayed out. They're no longer used. Now, the items in the game are mainly used for overcoming obstacles, defeating enemies, defeating bosses, solving puzzles, but there is obstacles in the way, and your items are the instruments you use to overcome them. But now half of them are grayed out, you can't use them. And it's another way that Link's world kind of gets rocked as he becomes an adult. He can't use his old methods of overcoming these obstacles. Even if they're the same obstacles, he can't use those methods. He has to evolve, he has to adapt with the world, and you have to adapt as a player, because you face a lot of these same puzzles, but now you have to do them differently, because you have the bow instead of the slingshot, and even though they're mechanically very similar, they're also slightly different. And the bow is a lot better version of the slingshot, so you end up refining these. It's like you have these certain methods of navigating the world, of overcoming obstacles, solving puzzles. But then you become an adult and you can't use those methods anymore. So you find these new items, these new methods, they're better than the old ones. You grow and adapt with the world as it changes. And this is another part of becoming the best of Link's actualizing his potential is he has to realize, or not realize necessarily, but he has to adapt to changing circumstances, and his foundational, I guess, techniques of navigating the world are shattered. He has to find new techniques of navigating the world, adapt, and grow stronger as he does so. Okay. Well, after you beat the Forest Temple, the Great Deku Tree Sprout comes, and it's in theory going to grow into a new Deku Tree, and it'll watch over the forest again. So, once we defeat the evil, Rebirth comes. Yay. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the Fire and Water Temples. The Fire Temple is in Death Mountain, the realm of the Gorons, and the Water Temple is in Lake Hylia, the realm of the Zoras. Now, the Goron leader, Darunia, he is a warrior. I think he's like a grizzled veteran Goron warrior. And he still has a very fiery kind of personality. See what I did there? And the Gorons are being eaten by the dragon Volvagia that Ganon's feeding them to because he's a dick. And Darunia, the Goron chieftain, this past warrior, is going to fight the dragon. But he knows he's kind of screwed because he doesn't have a legendary hammer, which you get and you defeat the boss with it. But he's going to go anyway, right? He's got the courage, but at the same time, it's kind of stupid courage. It's courage without wisdom. He's going in a situation where he knows he's fucked, but he's going to try and do it anyway. And obviously, there's a lot of nobility to that, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of stupidity to that. It's like, well, you know, Link's more capable than you are. He can go get the hammer. He can defeat the dragon. And, you know, you just got to pick your battles. So, the fire here, his fire personality represents the aggression, the courage, the ability to go out and assert yourself on the world, for better or for worse. Now let's look on the Zora temples. The Zora side, the Water Temple side. Zora's domain has been frozen over by Ganondorf, and the chieftain of the Zoras, King Zora, is a stark contrast to Darunia. Instead of being a warrior, he is a fat ass, and all he does during the game is move at, he moves about 10 feet. That's all he does in the fucking game. He's just a fat, lazy ass who just sits on his throne and does fuck all. So, while he sits there doing sweet FA, Ganon comes in and freezes the Zoras and traps them all under the sheet of ice. And so, whereas fire represented kind of the aggressive side, water represents the more tempered, passive side. And King Zora has gotten so passive, he's so lazy, that he was unable to help his people when they got frozen. And, you know, if you're so passive, if you're so afraid or unable to make a change on that world around you, it feels like the world around you is frozen. It's immutable. You do not have the power to change it. It might as well be frozen as far as you're concerned. So you have these two contrasting ideas: this balance of fire and ice, the aggressive, headstrong quality versus being passive. And it's only through this balance that you can achieve perfection, because that's what this game is about. That's what the 7 years is. There's 7 stages. There's 6 stages plus Zelda for 7. So you see a lot of this 7, this theme of perfection, this theme of realizing your potential and becoming perfect. And in this case, perfect means being able to defeat Ganondorf and being the best version of yourself that you can be. That's perfection as far as this game is concerned. So this is a journey of how Link becomes the best version of himself. And by exposing himself to these Gorons and these Zoras, he learns, and you learn as a player, that one end or another of this passive-aggressive spectrum, let's say, leads to disaster. But having the right balance, fighting the dragon when you're ready, prepared with the hammer, and also being headstrong enough to be able to change your world if bad things start to happen, and willing to go do so, is is how you can become the best version of yourself. Also in the Water Temple, the mini boss is Dark Link, and if you ask a Navy some hints about Dark Link, she just says conquer yourself. Well, that's interesting. Conquer yourself. And Dark Link mirrors your movements, but and as you do damage to Dark Link, he grows less transparent and more opaque. Like the shadow became thicker, something like that. And this Dark Link, I think, is the Jungian shadow, named after Carl Jung, who said that there's evil in each one of us, and it's only through seeing that inner evil inside of you is that the way you can truly grow up. Because number one, you see yourself the capability of doing evil, inside you. You see that, and then you're able to deal with it, so you're not, I guess, caught off guard by your own malevolence. And number two, that you can use kind of the, I guess, aggressive, more evil side in a good way to put good on the world. But anyway, Link has to conquer this dark, shadowy version of himself, and as he does damage, it gets less transparent, it gets thicker, and it shows that as Link looks into this dark side of himself, he's more able to clearly see his own evil, and seeing his own evil, confronting it, and defeating it is how he again becomes perfect. He realizes his potential, and he becomes the best version of himself. He has to conquer himself. He has to conquer his own evil in order to become perfect enough to defeat the evil in the world, Ganondorf. And the terrain of that battle, the water is very reflective, which kind of makes sense, as Link's basically staring into a mirror as he's fighting Dark Link. So, after you go through those temples, you come to the Shadow Temple. Now, the Shadow Temple was a Sheikah prison, and I don't know if this is just a theory or confirmed by like Hyrule Historia, but it's pretty evident. There's a lot of evidence that the Shadow Temple is a prison. There's like little posts on the walls, so they hang the shackles. There's jail cells. There's torture devices. This is a very sinister place, and the Shadow Temple also represents the underworld, as you start at the top of the Shadow Temple and the big boss is at the very bottom. And in order to navigate the Shadow Temple, you need the item, the Lens of Truth. And the Lens of Truth allows you to see invisible walls, blocks, or through fake walls and stuff like that. And it just shows you that if you descend into the underworld, if you descend into the very essence of evil itself, truth is the weapon, your best defense against the kind of evil, the lies and deception of the underworld. And just by sticking to truth, by having that beacon, you can navigate the underworld. Now, what's interesting about the Shadow Temple's the boss, Bongo Bongo. That's right, Phantom Shadow Beast, Bongo Bongo himself. And he is two disembodied hands with this torso, and his weak point is his eye, which is actually the stump of his neck. He's been decapitated basically. It's the stump of his neck. All right, is his weak point, and it's got a giant eyeball on it, and it looks like his schlong. Okay, that's what I thought it was when I was a kid, but it's actually a decapitated neck. And this is kind of shocking because number one, it's pretty morbid when you think about it. You're fighting a fucking decapitated torso, drumming a drum, I guess, with his disembodied hands, and it shows you that maybe the Sheikah, the noble protectors of the royal family, weren't all noble after all. Maybe they had some bad apples and they tortured, decapitated their enemies. And maybe this Bongo Bongo was a bad guy, but hey, did he deserve to get decapitated? Was that justice? Or, I don't know, did the art of war, I guess, when the Sheikah were in war, because I think in Hyrule Historia, which I need to read, they said something about like a Sheikah war before Ocarina of Time started. Maybe in the war they went a little too far. Maybe they did some waterboarding. Maybe they did some decapitating. And it just shows you maybe maybe the people you thought were good weren't so good. And in seeing the evil here too, and traveling through the underworld, it makes Link more perfect. He has to expose himself to such malevolence that he's able to be able to confront it when he finally faces Ganon. who's a lot more powerful than any malevolence he'll find in the Shadow Temple. But it's through the Shadow Temple that he is able to come face to face with the kind of evil that he'll need to come face to face with when he faces the tyrant Ganondorf. Okay, and the final temple is the Spirit Temple. And in the Spirit Temple, you go in and there's two snake head writing tablets, I guess, that you can read. And one says, if you want to proceed into the past, which is the left door, you need to return with the pure heart of a child. So go back to the theme of childhood innocence. It's a pure heart. It's untainted by evil. It's not even been exposed to evil. The exposure to evil comes when Ganondorf takes over the world and radically shifts Hyrule to his own twisted design, right? But you put the Master Sword back, and suddenly the world is bright again, it's shiny, everyone's dancing and playing, and you got your childhood innocence again. The world just seems so much more pure. And it says, if you want to proceed into the future, which is the right door, you need the power of silver, aka the silver gauntlets, gained from the past. So obviously the mechanic is you go in as a child, and you get the silver gauntlets, then you return as an adult and do the rest of the dungeon, right? But the power of silver gained from the past, that can be more than just the left side of the temple. That can mean that you can build yourself a strong foundation in childhood and adolescence that it carries with you to adulthood. And when you're finally capable of confronting tyrants, facing evil, or conquering whatever you have to do, you can fall on this foundation and you just strengthen it as you grow up. Okay, then you go to Ganon's Tower, and in Ganon's Tower there are 6 medallion doors, I suppose, each representing to one of the temples, along with the light medallion, which is in the Temple of Light, which is the Sacred Realm, which basically you get that for free. And you conquer each of those rooms, and it's like you have to master each individual aspect of yourself before finally you're perfect and can go and are capable of defeating Ganon. Now, after Link defeats Ganon, I guess the one notable thing is that Zelda pins him down while Link delivers the final blow. And Zelda's the Triforce of Wisdom, and Link is the Triforce of Courage. So the wisdom holds down the tyranny while the courage upends it. So now, what does all this shit that I just went over for the past 20 minutes, what does that have to do with my life? What does it have to do with me in my everyday world? Obviously, there's no Master Sword I have to pull out. There's no Ganondorf. Well, you might have your own Ganondorf in your life. It might not be like a human, it might just be like a goal you have. And in order to achieve this goal, you have to become the best version of yourself you can. And you might be beset by evil, you might be beset by malevolence or other such obstacles, maybe not necessarily evil. But if you master these different aspects of yourself, you can conquer whatever obstacle you have, just being the best that you can be, actualizing your own potential. And that's why Ocarina of Time resonates. It's a basic hero's journey that at its simplest form is boy gets called to action, boy gets the Master Sword. The Master Sword, he grows up with the Master Sword, and then now he's strong enough to defeat the evil. He defeats the evil and pieces return to Hyrule, but it's much more than that. You have all these depths of characters and experiences that have this kind of subconscious, I guess, undertone to that basic hero archetype. And you realize that this is a story of not just about defeating Ganondorf, but also about becoming the best that Link can be, becoming perfect. And perfect, again, means just being the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. And it's only through being perfect, and it's only through conquering all these different aspects of themselves, through interacting with a bunch of people in the world, both good and bad, that Link can defeat the tyrant. And obviously there's a sense of accomplishment you get from finally grinding through all that dungeon, facing the journey, and finally defeating Ganondorf. Your quest is complete. And it's basic enough, but also very deep in a sense. Uh, and it's a lot of stuff in this game wasn't made by mistake, and it's because of this and also the revolutionary gameplay that this game sticks with you. The story sticks with you. The characters stick with you. They're very memorable. There's a lot of foils. It's very well done from kind of a, I guess, a literary perspective in terms of getting the overall story uh, not only told but shown in a way, and Link's quest to become the best version of himself, to become a hero strong enough to topple the tyranny of Ganondorf, and you get to experience that with him. And it's a method that could only work in a video game. You couldn't make an Ocarina of Time movie and get this kind of resonation with players. You couldn't write an Ocarina of Time book and get this kind of resonation with players. But it's only through this video game actually being able to interact with the world and see how Link evolves in his journey, how he interacts with all these different characters on his journey, and how he grows up and becomes the hero of time. That that you that you get this message of becoming complete, becoming the best version of yourself you can be. So that kind of last sentence there, that conclusion sentence was a little fucked up, but you get the point.